Disgusting phrase. When did you hear of anyone choking on someone else's vomit?
What if I told you some of the biggest stars in Hollywood had secrets so wild they could make a blockbuster movie on their own? From hidden booze stashes to scandalous parties, buckle up as we dive into the 35 nasty rumors from alcoholics in Hollywood history. Number 35. Errol Flynn. Imagine a Hollywood star so wild his antics could shut down an entire studio bar. That's right, Errol Flynn is known as one of the original Hollywood Hellraisers, and his legendary exploits with women and men and alcohol and drugs are the stuff of Hollywood lore.
I'm a man who loves beautiful things. Unfortunately, so do my creditors.
Flynn's life was a whirlwind of booze-fueled debauchery. He once got rum drunk with a pre-rebellion Fidel Castro, and it wasn't just offset where his drinking caused chaos. On the Warner Brothers lot, Flynn's excessive drinking became such a problem that Mr. Warner himself had to shut down the bar to keep Flynn from being too drunk to work. Flynn was never without his daily medicine, a doctor's bag containing 2/5 of vodka, his morning routine, Bloody Marys instead of whiskey to mask the smell of alcohol. But his favorite trick was even sneakier, injecting vodka into oranges and snacking on the boozy fruit throughout the day. His Malibu bachelor pad, shared with fellow actor David Niven, was infamously dubbed Cirrhosis by the Sea. The tales of drunken excess from this pad are only matched by those of sexual debauchery. Errol Flynn's wild lifestyle didn't stop with his death. In a final, fitting tribute to his love for alcohol, he was buried with 6 bottles of whiskey in his coffin. Now, if that doesn't cement his status as a Hollywood legend, I don't know what does. Number 34. Ethel Barrymore. What if the very thing that brought your family fame also threatened to destroy it? For Ethel Barrymore, alcohol was that poison. The famous Barrymore clan, known for their massive talent on stage and screen, also had a destructive appetite for various vices. Ethel, one of the brightest stars in the Barrymore dynasty, began her illustrious career in the 1890s. She quickly became a sensation on both Broadway and the West End. But behind the scenes, her life was far from glamorous. Whenever trouble struck in her personal life, Ethel turned to alcohol as an escape. Her struggle with drinking mirrored that of her brother, John Barrymore, whose own battles with alcohol were notorious. The need to drink began to consume her, threatening to overshadow her incredible talent. But unlike many tragic Hollywood stories, Ethel found a way to reclaim her life. In her 30s, she made the brave decision to become a teetotaler, swearing off alcohol entirely. "No one in my family should drink because it's poison to us," she declared, a stark acknowledgement of the destructive force alcohol had on the Barrymore legacy. Number 33. Bernard Lee. Imagine a man so gripped by addiction, he found ways to drink even when locked in a room. That's the tragic story of Bernard Lee, the esteemed actor known for his role as M, the head of the British Secret Service, in 11 James Bond movies. Bernard Lee had a prolific career spanning 50 years, with over 100 film and television credits to his name. Yet behind his impressive resume lay a life marked by profound personal tragedy and addiction. The death of his beloved wife in a house fire, a brutal mugging, and mounting unpaid debts plunged Lee into deep depression and severe alcohol abuse. His dependency became so intense that during breaks from filming the Edgar Wallace television series, he was locked in his dressing room to prevent him from drinking. But Lee's resourcefulness in feeding his addiction was startling. He reportedly hired someone to feed a straw through the keyhole, allowing him to continue drinking even when confined. This level of desperation left an impression even on other prolific drinkers. Richard Burton, known for his own heavy drinking, admitted he wasn't in the same league as Lee, who once drank him under the table. Number 32. Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood, writes Bailey, was a wild child who was already drinking wine with Sinatra at the age of 15.
I thought you didn't drink.
I don't.
Well, what are you running here, the USO?
Would you like a drink?
Thank you.
A few years later, she found herself with her Rebel Without a Cause co-stars Dennis Hopper and Nick Adams. They decided to have a threesome, but Wood would only participate if she could bathe in champagne first, like Jean Harlow. Hopper and Adams bought several cases of champagne and poured it all into the bathtub. Once full, Wood disrobed and submerged herself, ready for her new sexual adventure, until she began screaming. As soon as her most sensitive areas came in contact with the alcohol, she shrieked in pain, Bailey writes. Thus the orgy was extinguished. Number 31. Richard Burton. Imagine drinking a case of beer before noon. To say that anyone is drunk all the time is obviously hyperbole, but perhaps the man that's come closest to that lofty ideal is Richard Burton. Burton started drinking at age 12 and continued unabated by doctor's advice or personal tumult. until his passing at age 58 with a body as riddled with alcohol damage as any ever seen by medical science.
Believe me, the question of being an alcoholic, I'm not quite sure that I am one, but if I'm not one, I'm very near.
His routine was to start with a case of beer and work on that through the morning. Once he had polished that off, he would switch to hard liquor. Taylor, by comparison, was a relative teetotaler. She didn't start drinking with her husband until 10 a.m. In 1964's The Night of the Iguana, Burton demanded a private bar at the top of the staircase that led to the set, and another one at the bottom. Number 30, Leonard Nimoy. Even Mr. Spock couldn't resist the call of alcohol. Leonard Nimoy, or should I say Mr. Spock, battled an alcohol addiction while filming the iconic Star Trek. Nimoy later stated that he began drinking to cope with the long days on the Star Trek set. William Shatner stated that Nimoy drank to numb the sheer disappointment of stardom, and one drink turned into two, and before Leonard knew it, his addictive personality kicked in and he couldn't stop. He entered rehab once filming for the show had ended. Nimoy lived until his other habit of smoking took his life at the age of 83. Number 29, Robert Shaw. What if a shark wasn't the scariest thing on set? Big sharps, choppy water, and testy co-workers made the filming of 1975's Jaws an absolute nightmare for most of the people involved. Robert Shaw sipped on scotch during long filming days because tension between him and his co-star, Richard Dreyfuss. Shaw was drunk in most of the film with the exception of one scene, the scene where his character actually gets drunk. Richard Dreyfuss later stated that he liked Shaw when he was sober, but couldn't stand the man drunk. Once Dreyfuss actually took a glass of booze out of Shaw's hand and dumped it overboard into the ocean. Number 28, Ann-Margret. Her drinking started as a way to cope. Ann-Margret is known as one of the original sex kittens and as a gal who knew how to have a good time. Ann-Margret's full-blown alcoholism is believed to have started on the set of student protest drama RPM, where she began drinking to help overcome her anxiety about doing the film's nude scenes. By 1971, she was incapable of separating fantasy from reality, as she later wrote. "I drink a fifth of scotch, pass out, wake up, drink some more, and pass out again."
I drank for 5 years, and then it stopped working for me, and I just stopped.
Number 27, John Barrymore. Starting young didn't bode well for his future. Another member of the great Hollywood Barrymore acting dynasty, John Barrymore was both an acclaimed talent and a renowned alcoholic. Before he took to the stage, he took to drinking, with some sources stating he began drinking as young as 14. His alcoholism only got worse from there, as he began to use his talent to feed his habits. Eventually, he left the stage for the bright lights of Hollywood, as well as the large Hollywood salaries that could feed him his unending appetites for sex, drugs, and drink. Barrymore's wild party persona got him blacklisted from almost every major studio. Number 26, Clara Bow. Drunken introductions and stolen kisses marked her legacy. Sometimes it's difficult to tell which of the stories surrounding classic stars are real and which are the products of exaggeration, studio spin, mythologization by overeager fans or themselves, or just straight-up lies passed around by bitter enemies. Among the more credible tales about Bow's behavior is the time that Paramount president B.P. Schulberg invited her to a party celebrating a recently appointed judge. She arrived at the party already drunk and proceeded to introduce herself to the judge by aggressively French kissing him in front of his wife, then dancing with him until she was unceremoniously escorted off the premises by studio personnel. Number 25, Dennis Price. From matinee idol to tragic figure. Becoming a matinee idol on stage and scoring it big later with one of the finest comedies to come out of England, 1949's Kind Hearts and Coronets, Price and his contemporaries Alec Guinness and James Mason seemed poised to take on international acclaim. However, it was then that the drinking began to get out of control. Though he went on to star in popular British comedies and military dramas, his co-stars claimed that he would start off on a crate of Guinness at breakfast and finish it by the end of the day, along with plenty of scotch. Reported to be drunk most of the time by his associates, he would faithfully show up to the studio with booze in a shopping bag, and he once ambled on stage during the first act of a play performing the final one. Number 24, Cary Grant. A surprising cure for a Hollywood icon. Cary Grant had a problem with alcohol and decided to get help in the 50s to cure his problem. To cure Grant's alcoholism, his doctor prescribed a new drug at the time, LSD. Grant loved the trips he took on the drug and introduced some of his friends to it. Judy Balaban, the daughter of Paramount president, stated, "I figured if it was good enough for Cary Grant, it was good enough for me." Grant is believed to have taken LSD about 100 times while being treated. but it changed his outlook on life and he lived happily until passing away at the age of 82. Number 23, Barbara Payton. Queen of the nightclubs, but at what cost? When Payton first entered Hollywood in the late 1940s, the town was still in the middle of the Great Golden Age, and young Barbara was soon swept into the hedonistic whirlwind that was the parties, bars, and casting couches of the era. Barbara was dubbed Queen of the Nightclubs and was seen carousing with Howard Hughes, Bob Hope, and mobster Mickey Cohen. She made appearances in several big pictures, but before long, her party lifestyle became more important to her than her work, and her life became a series of destructive behaviors and bad relationships, most notably a love triangle between her, Frank Attone, and Tom Neal. Number 22, Frank Sinatra. Jack Daniels was more than just a favorite. Frank Sinatra was what many people considered a functioning alcoholic. He claimed that Jack Daniels was his favorite. His signature drink was 4 ice cubes, 2 fingers of Jack, and a splash of water in a traditional rocks glass. Sinatra passed away in 1998 at the age of 82. He was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels in his casket. Number 21, Montgomery Clift. His drinking was driven by deep-seated pain. Montgomery Clift was known around town as an eager but sloppy drunk, unable to gracefully hold his liquor. The tortured, brooding method actor is reported to have drank in part due to the fact that he was a homosexual at the time, when that was totally unacceptable for a Hollywood leading man. He became a co-star, confidant, and drinking partner of Elizabeth Taylor, who knew his secret and loved and supported him until his demise. Number 20, Michael Landon. Behind the wholesome image lurked a dark secret. Michael Landon, known for his roles on Bonanza and Little House on the Prairie, was the pinnacle of the clean, well-respected man on television. He did it for decades, but he had an addiction to alcohol and Valium that constantly clouded the perfect picture. His co-stars knew that he drank some, but they just had no idea how much he was drinking on set. Landon would spike his coffee with whiskey and other soft drinks with vodka. After filming was completed for the day, they would head out to the bar and continue drinking more. Number 19, Andre the Giant. A giant thirst to match his giant stature. Though he was known by many as the eighth wonder of the world, it is his role as Fezzik in the family classic The Princess Bride that has cemented him in the minds and hearts of fans everywhere. Although known by his friends as generally being a gentleman, under the influence, the Hulk was a force to be reckoned with. He once flipped a small car over with a few men inside that had the nerve to pick on him inside a bar, and another time, he and fellow wrestler Dusty Rhodes took off on a pair of horse-drawn carriages through the streets of Manhattan. Number 18, Joan Crawford. The ultimate ambassador with an interesting side gig. Joan Crawford was married to the CEO of PepsiCo, and she was given a position as the official ambassador for Pepsi. Her husband figured this would be a smart business move, being a very famous actress. Joan toured the world as Pepsi's ambassador, and at each stop of the tour, she requested to be provided with 2/5 of Smirnoff, 1/5 of Old Forester bourbon, 1/5 of Scotch, 1/5 of Beefeater gin, 2 bottles of champagne, and of course, a case of Pepsi. Number 17, W.C. Fields. Lemon or lemonade? Depends on who you ask. W.C. Fields was a man for his strict discipline regarding alcohol. I have never imbibed while sleeping, and I drink nothing stronger than gin before breakfast. The classic W.C. Fields drinking story is that while on set he carried a vacuum flask filled with gin martinis that he would refer to as his lemonade, or in other tellings his pineapple juice. One time, however, some practical joker switched out his contents with actual lemonade, prompting the furious cry, "Who put lemonade in my lemonade?" Number 16, Dean Martin. Was his drunken persona all just an act? The King of Cool's performing persona was based on being a lovable drunk.
I feel sorry for you people that don't drink. I mean it, because when you wake up in the morning, that's as good as you're going to feel all day.
Although his daughter and other close friends have claimed that it was all just an act, and Dino just had apple juice in his glass. It was just the drink and cigarette in his hand that made him more revered. Men wanted to be him, and the women wanted to be with him. He was a kind father, always home for dinner, and only had one cocktail with his wife during the evening. Number 15, Richard Harris. A bender so legendary it defies logic. Another lionized member of the O'Toole, Burton, Oliver Reed gang, Richard Harris was every bit the actor and every bit the alcoholic, as were his inebriated contemporaries.
There were 3 of us legends for drinking, okay, and for having a rough, kind of a wild Rabelaisian life. One was Richard Burton, of course, Peter O'Toole, the great O'Toole, and Harris.
Once, during a bender, Harris was found lying in the middle of the street by a local policeman. When the cop asked him what he was doing, Harris replied, "The world is spinning." When the officer asked what lying in the street was doing for that, his answer was, logically, "I'm waiting for my house to go by." Number 14, Frank Sinatra. When Sinatra partied, the whole neighborhood knew. Frank Sinatra wasn't a stranger to hosting parties. His guest lists often included names like Marilyn Monroe, Lana Turner, Cary Grant, and Bing Crosby. President John F. Kennedy even had a designated guest room in his Palm Springs home. According to legend, Sinatra would raise a Jack Daniels flag in his yard to inform friends and neighbors that partying had begun. His Palm Springs home, known as Twin Palms, has been preserved for future generations, and visitors can take a tour to see one of old Hollywood's most infamous places to party. Number 13, Oliver Reed. Church, christening, and rugby with a baby. During the late 60s and early 70s, this English actor was one of the biggest box office draws in Britain. Renowned for his performances in films like The Trap, Oliver, and the Three Musketeers series, his persona off-screen wasn't as charming as those he played for the camera. 1980, for instance, he went to a church for a christening so drunk that he swayed back and forth while standing, and at a reception held later, he held the baby in his arms and stumbled up and down the room pretending to play rugby with the child as the ball. He was also known for exposing his tattooed penis in public, bringing attention to it as his mighty mallet. He once climbed a chimney naked pretending to be Santa Claus, urinated on the Australian flag, and lay drunk on an airport baggage conveyor. Number 12, Tallulah Bankhead. High society meets hard partying. Tallulah Bankhead was the well-heeled daughter of an Alabama congressman. She lived at the famed Algonquin Hotel. Living in the hotel put her in touch with hard-drinking high society and introduced her to the legendary inebriated Algonquin Round Table and its crew of notable sots like Dorothy Parker, George S. Kaufman, and Robert Benchley. Tallulah was known to frequently polish off fifths of whiskey in under 30 minutes, snort poppers, take horse tranquilizers, and mix herself a special cocktail of Coca-Cola and spirits of ammonia. Always one that could turn a phrase, Bankhead's last words were reportedly codeine bourbon. Number 11, Lee Marvin. Could drinking make you a better performer? There was no denying that actor Lee Marvin was a drinker. In fact, many directors and co-stars said tipping the bottle actually improved his performance. Marvin was drinking pretty heavily while filming Paint Your Wagon, but this may have helped him in the end. With no previous singing experience, Marvin was going out on a limb with this musical. The result was a huge surprise. Marvin, who definitely was not a singer, ended up with a gold record for his performance of Wanderin' Star. Number 10, Spencer Tracy. A drunk who wasn't fun at all. Spencer Tracy was not what anyone would have called a fun drunk. The two-time Oscar winner was known for being mean and violent when he was under the influence, and he was under the influence a lot. Tracy was frequently involved in bar fights, often ended up in police custody, and even once woke up in a padded cell in a Chicago asylum. He hated to fly and would take the train instead, packing his suitcase with bottles and drinking his way across the country. He would hole himself up in hotel rooms for weeks on end, often just sitting in the bathtub and doing nothing but drinking, not even getting up to use the toilet. MGM Studio kept a team on retainer known as the Tracy Squad that was employed strictly to take care of the depressive binge drinker. Every bar in a 25-mile radius was given the number, and, when called, an ambulance would show up and a doctor and several security guards would grab Tracy and whisk him away to go sober up somewhere out of the public view. Number 9, Ava Gardner. Even Golden Age icons weren't immune to the drink. When it comes to Hollywood's golden age, Ava Gardner is a name that cannot be ignored. Ava had a tumultuous love life, battled alcoholism, and had to deal with the pressures of being a woman in a male-dominated industry. It was not unusual for Miss Gardner to be asked to leave more upscale venues for over-exuberance, whether that was peeing in the lobby of the Ritz Madrid or pouring a martini down the front of a bar owner's trousers. She was banned not only from the Ritz Madrid, but also from the St. Regis in New York. Number 8, Veronica Lake. Her signature hairstyle wasn't her only claim to fame. Lake was best known for her femme fatale roles in film noirs with Alan Ladd during the 1940s, her peekaboo hairstyle, and films such as Sullivan's Travels in 1941 and I Married a Witch in 1942. Lake started drinking heavily, particularly to cope with the pressures of Hollywood, and partially because she loved basking in the nightlife. Still, it didn't love her back, and she often showed up for early calls looking rough and thoroughly hungover, and drinking wasn't her only vice. Number 7, Robert Mitchum. Chaos followed wherever he went. Robert Mitchum was no pretty boy leading man. He was a dark, brooding force that was known to bring chaos in the wake of his drunkenness. Mitchum described working with Frank Sinatra, Broderick Crawford, and Lee Marvin in Not as a Stranger as not so much a cast as it was a brewery. The drinking commenced in the morning and continued through the insane parties at night where, amongst the other acts of debauchery, hotel rooms were trashed. Crawford was forced to eat Sinatra's wig, and then, in a later incident, poor Broderick was also thrown off a hotel balcony. Their room deposits were not returned. Number 6. The Garden of Allah, a haven for Hollywood's hedonistic elite. In the golden age of Hollywood, there was a place that became synonymous with booze, sex, drugs, and lavish parties overflowing with decadence. The place, called the Garden of Allah Hotel, would be home to many celebrities over the years, the walls of which would be privy to stories that would be remembered forever. The Garden of Allah Hotel was a place where Hollywood players could engage in any hedonistic proclivities they wished, without any fear of repercussions for their actions. It was a safe haven for them. Number 5. Paul Lynde, a drunk and notorious troublemaker. Paul Lynde is known as Uncle Arthur in Bewitched. His problems with watching his mouth while in public only got worse as he got older, and Lynde had incidents of getting thrown out of bars, harassing police officers, and, most shockingly, drunkenly spewing racial slurs during his alma mater's homecoming weekend. After getting involved in a drunken police chase that later led to a DUI, Lynde is reported to have rolled down his window and drawled to the officer in his distinctive lisp, "I'll have a double cheeseburger and a chocolate shake." Number 4. Peter O'Toole. From blackouts to buying pubs on a whim, the former Lawrence of Arabia seemed to have a habit of starting to drink, blacking out, and waking up in strange places, like Mexico, or in a stranger's apartment with Michael Caine. He loved drinking so much that one night, when a pub he was drinking at threatened to close its doors on him, O'Toole just bought the pub on the spot instead. He did return the next day to destroy the check, but legend has it that he and the pub owner remained close until the owner's passing. Then when O'Toole tried to attend the service for his longtime friend, he showed up totally wasted to the wrong funeral. Number 3. Debbie Reynolds and Elizabeth Taylor. Reconciliation over drinks with a twist. Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Fisher became a rather famous couple despite the scandal with them and Debbie Reynolds. However, everyone ended up cheating on everyone.
But he really went to be with Elizabeth, which I found out, and realized that there was something going on seriously there. And
Taylor ended up having an affair with her fellow Cleopatra co-star Richard Burton. The movie released and Taylor and Fisher released each other from their matrimonial promises. Reynolds, meanwhile, ended up marrying Harry Carl. By then, Taylor had ended up married to Burton. While both women were married to completely different men, they both planned a cruise and a reconciliation dinner.
It's a long time gone. I admire how Elizabeth has gone on and made her life better now, and she's really worked hard to come where she has. She's had a love of her life, Richard Burton. And
we got on the same boat to go to Europe, the Queen Elizabeth, Reynolds outlined to Vogue. I sent a note to her, and she sent a note to me in passing, and then we had dinner together. She was married to Richard Burton by then. I had been remarried at that point, and we just said, let's call it a day. They had more plans for their makeup night, though, and we got smashed, Reynolds added, concluding with, and we had a great evening and stayed friends since then. Number 2. Orson Welles. Balancing gin and bitters, but it was healthy. Orson Welles' relationship with alcohol began with his father, a nasty drunk whose irresponsibility ended up blowing up the family fortune. While working in Rome on black magic, Welles helped popularize a previously little-known cocktail called the Negroni when he sent a message to a stateside newspaper extolling its virtues. The bitters are good for your liver. The gin is bad for it. They balance each other out. Welles's interesting ideas about how the human body works notwithstanding, this endorsement was the first time many Americans heard of the rust-colored gin drink, and sales shot up in bars across the country. Number 1. Humphrey Bogart. The scar above his lip holds many tales. If you listen to the accounts of various studio publicists, Humphrey Bogart got the distinctive scar above his lip either from a childhood fistfight, after being punched by a prisoner he was transporting as a sailor in the Navy, or taking shrapnel during a battle while aboard the USS Leviathan. If you ask his post-Navy drinking buddies, on the other hand, they'll tell you that Bogart got the scar during one of his many barroom brawls in the Prohibition-era speakeasies of New York. During his early years as a Broadway actor, Bogart was known for drinking until he fell asleep at the bar and then taking exception to anyone that tried to rouse him. His late-night antics got him kicked off more than one production, but that didn't stop him from finding enough success that he was eventually able to move the bar cart out west to Hollywood. Despite everything, Bogart claimed to have only gone on the wagon once. That was the worst afternoon of my life. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe for more juicy Hollywood secrets. Until next time, Keep it classy, keep it curious, and keep coming back for more.